We are continuing our studies in Ezekiel, and we saw last week that we're in chapter 47, and how the vision that was given to Ezekiel leading up to this chapter, chapters 41, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's seeing the foundation of the temple, he's seeing the layout of the temple, he's seeing the layout of the holy city, he's seeing where the priests are set up, he's seeing some of the ordinances, and finally, in the 47th chapter, he's brought to the door of the house, and now he's seeing, Jesus sitting on the throne. And he's beginning to see what's happening. And what we saw last week is basically the waters that issue out from under the threshold of the house, from the throne of God, that run to the right side and to the hinder sea and to the former sea, going all the way to the Mediterranean and down to the Dead Sea. This is the river of God. And we saw all the blessings that came out of the river of God. And we saw last week how the river heals everything that it touches, and today we'll look at the healing of the nations that go on there. But we saw it's the river of life. We saw all through the scriptures that the river of God's grace is something that he's wanted to reach down to people with, and we saw that the river, it starts out as we get in it up to the ankles, and then it gets up to our knees, and then to the loins, and finally it's a river that we swim in. And it's the continual growth of the river of God's grace moving into us, filling us little by little by little, initially just a small portion of us, and more and more and more, and finally to the point where it's a river to swim in, because we reach what's been promised as the fullness of Christ. And God wants us to have the fullness of the grace of Christ and to be filled with the Spirit the way God gave the Spirit to his Son without measure. And verse 7, as he returned, behold, at the bank of the river there were very many trees. Now, initially, as he was looking at the river coming out from the throne, he's just focusing on the river itself. Now, as he's coming back, he's beginning to notice that there are very many trees on the one side and on the other side. And what he's showing is these, he said to me, verse 8, these waters which issue out toward the east country, when they go down to the desert and go down to the sea, that would be the Dead Sea, which brought forth unto the sea, the waters of the Dead Sea shall be healed. And we know that for thousands of years now, since God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, right there, the fire and brimstone that he put back in Genesis 18 and 19 on Sodom and Gomorrah, caused that now to be a sea of death, and nothing lives in the Dead Sea. And it's a miry sea. It's the lowest point on planet Earth. It's 1,300 feet below sea level. It's interesting to think that when the Jewish pilots are flying their planes, they're literally flying, when they fly over the Dead Sea, they're flying below sea level. I mean, if they're 300 feet above the sea, they're 1,000 feet below sea level. I mean, it's the lowest point on planet Earth. There is where the Dead Sea is. And now the waters from the throne of God come in, and the waters of the Dead Sea are finally healed. Verse 9, it'll come to pass that everything that liveth, which moveth, whithersoever the rivers come, shall live. There shall be a very great multitude of fish, because these waters from the throne of God shall come thither. And they now shall be healed, and the dead waters are now healed, and everything shall live whither the river cometh. And the river of God's grace is the river of life. And it's right here in the millennium, what God is showing with Jesus is that life comes from God's grace and comes from God. He's the God of the living, and he's bringing forth life. There shall be, he says in verse 9, a very great multitude of fish. Now, Jesus spoke of this in a few places in the Gospels. I think the first one we can go to is Matthew chapter 13. Now, many commentators think that this passage is just a spiritual, and there is a spiritual application to it. It is the river of God's grace, but it literally is water flowing out from the throne, the river, God's river flowing out from his Son Out of thy belly shall flow rivers of living water. Where are they coming from? They're coming from the river of God that's flowing into people. And it's flowing into the land, and it's bringing healing. Matthew chapter 13, picking it up at verse 47, Jesus is telling a number of parables about the kingdom of heaven. The millennial kingdom is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And during the millennium, the rule on planet Earth will be the words from heaven, the words of the Bible. And this is what the Lord was trying to tell Moses to explain to the people in the book of Deuteronomy. And I'll just read it to you real briefly. He said, the land that the Lord sware unto your fathers will be as the days of heaven upon the earth. And this is the land that God's giving. He wanted to bring it 2,000 years ago, but they rejected their king. We don't want this man as our king. And when they rejected the king, well, then the kingdom of heaven without the king can't exist. But now the kingdom of heaven is here, verse 47, and Jesus explains, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea, and it gathered of every kind, and it's gathering all kinds of things in the sea, which when it was full, it drew to the shore, and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. And what we're going to sadly see later on in this chapter, in verse 11, Ezekiel 47, there are still going to be miry places. There are still going to be marshes that will not be healed. They'll be given to salt. And so, although the kingdom of heaven, the word of God is being offered on the earth, many people are drinking of the river of God. Some people are rejecting it. And that's going to be one of the problems that goes on. And the millennial interpretation of this is verse 49, at the end of the world, the angels will come forth and sever the wicked from among the just. And what's going to happen, people are going to be rebel against Jesus at that time. And so the waters are healing people, but people that refuse the waters, there will be those people, there's going to be the bad that are going to be cast away at the white throne judgment. But he says the ones that are healed are a very great multitude of fish. And that's when Jesus spoke later on after his resurrection in John chapter 21. Because those that are the great multitude are those that accept and believe in the resurrection. They call upon Jesus as the Lord, and they believe God has raised him from the dead. And that's the key to salvation. And in this chapter here, in John chapter 21, we remember in John chapter 20 was the day of the resurrection. And in John chapter 21, after verse 1, after these things that he did on resurrection day, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. The Sea of Tiberias is connected to the Dead Sea by the river Jordan. And the waters that issue out there into the Dead Sea will flow up to the Jordan and into the Sea of Tiberias. But back then, at this time, he's showing himself to the men, and they were out fishing when he showed up, verse 4. And when the morning was come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, Children, have ye any meat? And they answered, No. Then we've been fishing all night. We haven't caught anything. He said, Well, cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. And what happens is they cast therefore, and they were not able to draw for the multitude of fishes. And we're told here it's going to be a very great multitude of fish. And here it is, and they're great multitude fish. Jesus said in verse 10, Bring the fish which ye have now caught. And Simon Peter went, and he drew the net full of great fishes, very great multitude of fish, 153. And there were so many, but the net was not broken. And the very great multitude of fishes that are drink of the river of God, they are healed. They are part of the family of God, and the net is not broken with them. I remember when I taught you a long time ago back in Luke chapter 5, before Jesus rose from the dead, and he sent them out another time to fish, and they went out and they sent their net, and the nets broke because of the fish. Because without the resurrection, that's like a broken net. It's like a broken gospel. It's not going to work. And here, now with him sitting on the throne and the river of God, of the grace flowing, and the understanding on the right side, as he said very many times, the waters issue from under the right side. The right side is the gospel in the New Testament, and those are the fish that are the great ones that are brought in. So back to where we are, we just see the parallel passages of the very great fish. The waters come there, they're healed, and in verse 9, and it will come to pass during the millennium, in verse 10, that the fishers shall stand upon it, that's the sea that's being healed, the Dead Sea, from Engedi even into an Aglaim. Okay, now I had to go back and look at a map. Engedi and an Aglaim, and I forget which is where, but the one is on the southwest corner of the Dead Sea, and the other is on the northeast corner of the Dead Sea. And what he's saying is going to be fishers all around the Dead Sea, and no matter where they are, it's they can spread forth their nets. It's a place to spread forth nets. Their fish shall be according to their kinds, as the fish of the great sea, exceeding many. And there's going to be literally a great place to go fishing there. I mean, Andy and Barney are going to go there, and Opie, they're all going to go. It's going to be a great place to catch fish. And this is a real picture of what's going on. But the portrait also is that the river of God is the place where you want to go when you want to catch fish. You want to go where God's grace is, and you want to bring God's grace with you when you go to catch fish. So it's a literal truth that's happening, and it's a spiritual truth that's happening here. And it says, according to their kinds, in verse 10. When God originally created on day one, he brought forth everything according to its kind. And later on, we'll see in verse 22 of this chapter, it says in Ezekiel 47:22, it'll come to pass when you divide that would be the land, by lot for an inheritance unto you and to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children. And the kinds of fish are going to be, they're going to be Jewish fish. There's going to be fish, people from other nations with the children that they beget. And the river of God's grace is going to run to all of them. So the literal picture, there's many different kinds of fish in the sea here. There's many different kinds of people out here in the sea of humanity that God's grace is reaching out to during the millennium, just like it reaches out there today. And so there are many kinds, as the fish of the great sea, exceeding many. And the grace of God is trying to reach out today, presently, to all kinds of people, exceeding many. How many? As many as be born. As many as being born, God's trying to reach them with the grace. And we have fishers working from Engedi to Anaglaim all over the world, on the northeast and the southwest, and people working all over. And this will be happening in the millennium, literally with real fish. It's happening today with the grace of God around the world, and it will be happening at that time, as we'll see later, with God's teaching priests and his servants during the kingdom of heaven, reaching out all over. So we see the portraits. Verse 11, but still, there's going to be some miry places in verse 11, and the marshes thereof, and they shall not be healed. They shall be given to salt. Salt is harsh, and salt is judgment. And they will be given to judgment, as Jesus explained to us when he was giving us the Sermon on the Mount, which is actually the kingdom rules of order. Somebody called a manifesto. I don't like that because it sounds communist. But anyways, Jesus was explaining in the Sermon on the Mount that there's going to be judgment. And what you need to do is you need to be reconciled to the Lord and to fellow man on the way, unless the adversary, while you're on the way, catches you and delivers you to the judge. And the judge delivers you to the officer, And I say, thou shalt not come out of prison till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. I mean, the salt of judgment is something that Jesus is going to be bringing. And that's why he said earlier to us, if the salt has lost its savor, what good is it good for? If you can't preach with judgment. Now, and you don't put as much salt on there as Gia does. Okay, I mean, the other day we went to get French fries, and she pours a complete pouch of salt on each French fry. Then it was ridiculous. You don't overdo that, but you season it with salt. I mean, the majority of the preaching is the honey of salvation, but the salt of judgment has to be there. And the marshes and the miry places will be given to salt. The Lord will be preaching judgment. His servants will be preaching judgment and reminding them, you better straighten up and fly right, or the judgment will come. You're still alive. You're under the mercy of God while we're alive. But one day you'll face the final judgment, and so the salt will be given there. And there will be miry places and marshes in the millennium, miry hearts that will not receive Jesus as the Lord. They will line up with Satan at the end of the 1,000 years. And so he leaves a portrait right there. There are some areas that, despite the fact that the water came, there are areas that would not receive it, and they're still miry and they're marshy, and they're not going to be healed. And they're just given to judgment, not to healing. God would rather give the right hand of judgment, but if they don't get the left hand of the right hand of healing, but they get the left hand of judgment and salt. Anyways, back to where we are in Ezekiel 47. And by the river, upon the bank thereof, on this side and on that side, on both sides of the river, shall grow all trees for meat. And he thinks of meat, he uses it a way of something that's nutritious enough to handle the needs of the body. So the needs, the vitamins, the minerals, the essential amino acids, the essential fatty acids, and the right carbohydrates are all in there. I mean, we think of meat as a complete food for us, and he thinks of the trees bringing forth meat like he did in Genesis chapter 1. It's almost like the millennium is a portrait of what was in the garden. The millennium is an expanded version of the garden, and God called the dry land earth, and he said, let the earth bring forth grass and herbs yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And of course that's what it did. And then God said to the man and the woman, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree, and it yields seed, and to you it shall be for meat. And I have given you every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And God thinks that's a healthier diet. So I have a feeling that part of the renewal that's going to happen is a renewal of the taste buds of people. And they'll like the better things as opposed to the things we've gotten used to. We've kind of corrupted our taste buds over the years. And God's going to fix that. And I remember when they were in the book of Leviticus, and Leviticus chapter 2, only in your King James Bible, it tells us that Leviticus 2, when anyone will bring a meat offering unto the Lord, the offering shall be of fine flour, one of the grains that come from nature there. And you put oil and frankincense on it, and that's called the meat offering. And I know the modern Bibles don't like that. They call it the meal offering or the bread offering or the grain offering, but it's meat. And God is saying here in Ezekiel 47 that the river on both sides, the trees are for meat. The leaf of the trees shall not fade, it says in verse 12. Neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It will bring forth plenteous. So as many people come to take from that tree, there won't be enough that it's barren at one point. It will continue to bring forth. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months. Why? Because the waters, they issued out of the sanctuary, and this is the river of God flowing into it. And the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine. So a couple things I see. The leaf shall not fade. Leaves fade in the autumn and fall, don't they? Which sounds to me like the millennium is summer. It's continual summer. There isn't autumn. There isn't winter. It is summer. Now, I don't know a lot about farming, but I think the harvest comes in late summer, doesn't it? And this is what's going to happen. Every one of those months of the year, it's coming now. And I remember when the disciples came to Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, after he left the temple, upbraiding the Pharisees for being a bunch of hypocrites. And they said, tell us, when's going to be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And Jesus said, well, I want you to learn a parable. When the fig tree, when his branch is tender and he puts forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. And then he says, and when you see these things, you'll know that it's at the door. This is the generation when I'm going to return. And so the summer is the millennium. And the millennium, he's telling you, there it is. The leaves don't fade. They keep their color. They don't start changing color and losing the chlorophyll and all the things that cause them to lose their color. Leaves are green because they have chlorophyll. When they lose their chlorophyll, then they might look yellow, they might look brown, they might look red. I don't know what they'll look. But not here. These leaves don't fade. The fruit is continual. And this is the tree of life in the millennium. One of the ways we know is what he's doing in the millennium is he's beginning to set up a template for the new heavens and the new earth. And so what's starting here as a garden will finally mature in the kingdom of heaven, will mature in the kingdom of God. And that will be when it's fully matured. Right here, it's a growth process. And there are still children to grow and still people to get there and still people to be sorted out. The good fish are kept. The bad ones are taken away. But when we finally get to the kingdom of God, it's all perfected. It's all completed. It's all ready. And so he's setting up the template for it. So when we looked at Revelation 21 and 22, we saw in 22 up in the New Jerusalem, he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of, now it's God and the Lamb. Down here in the Jerusalem in the millennium, it's the throne of the Lamb sitting there. The Lamb's on the throne. Now it's God and the Lamb because it's the New Jerusalem. And in the midst of the street and on either side of the river, there was the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves were for the healing of the nations. And so we're seeing a beginning portrait of it starting in the millennial reign here in Ezekiel 47, verse 12. And it's going out, and there it is. And the leaf shall not fade, and the fruit shall be for meat, to strengthen the bodies that live at that particular time. God always wanted his children to have healthy food. He gave Levitical diet. I can't remember, it's Levitical 11, I think it is. And Deuteronomy 14, he repeated it as to what things were healthy to eat. And now he's laying this out here for us, and he's making provision from the throne itself. And again, this is the fruit. When I think of fruit, it's mostly water, and this is from the river of God. So one bite in that, you're biting into the river of God's water, the holy rivers. I mean, an apple's 90% water, an orange is 95% water. I mean, you're getting all the rich water provided right from the throne of the Lamb, and it's for the healing of the nations. The leaf is for medicine. The marginal reference in the King James Bible says the leaf will be used also for bruises and sores. Somebody falls down, somebody gets a sore, they'll be able to take the leaf from the tree of life and rub it on there, and it will make it better. In the Bible, the word medicine is found 2 times. This is the one reference. The other one is in Proverbs chapter 17. And it's in verse 22. Proverbs 17, verse 22, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Now, we all know a merry heart is good, but he's saying like a medicine is good. Medicine is good. Merry hearts are good. These are two good things. Now, what the Lord has done down through the years is he has used the plants, life, and the trees to have medicines in them. I have a couple of books here. Nature's Medicine, Plants That Heal, Dr. Joel Suartolo, PhD, and his brother Paul, MD, and they wrote this for National Geographic, and it really is very poorly written. National Geographic, they're a bunch of idiots. You take something good like this and just trash it. But they did get a couple things right, but the first 330 pages are pretty much garbage. It really gets good when you get to the index and page 337. When it literally starts laying out the Latin names of the various plants and the common names from them and the medicines that come out of them. But basically what he did get right, at least in the introduction, is for all of human history, except the past 70 years, plants have been the chief source of medicine. That's correct. Now, being a dumb evolutionist, he talks about evolution on 150 million years ago and what the cavemen did and all that. But putting that aside, when he gets a little bit of it right, writing for National Geographic, there are pictures of all kinds of Indians and Africans jumping around, and it has nothing to do with anything. But the interactions between the biochemistry in plants and the human body is something that God designed. God designed the fundamental chemical components. It's like when if you're working at a car company, you use a lot of the same parts for different things. Well, God said, I got some good parts here. I'll use some here. I'll use some there. And he did. And they interact with each other. And the biochemistry of the plants in the human body work. For example, a Peruvian tree is where they found to cure malaria, where they found quinine. And all through the centuries, we found interesting things like that. The sad thing is, as he was noticing, his brother was noticing when this book was written about 20 years, in the past 40 years, the FDA has approved less than 12 plant-based drugs. They kind of put the kibosh on drugs coming from plants. Now, that's what bureaucracies do. Lawyers and bureaucracies don't build, they destroy. They don't take advantage of God's work. They try and confuse and wreck what God is doing. But going back for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's plants. Another one is not very good book, but Reader's Digest, The Magic and the Medicine of Plants. And in this one, again, they just go from A to Z, and they'll look at the goldenrod, golden seal, fennel, Colorado, bungleweed, butterfly weed, and they'll look at what are the various roots, what are the various plants, and what are the compounds that have been extracted out of them. And the Lord did it that way. Sick people need help. Jesus said so in Luke chapter 5, verse 31. The whole need not a physician, but the sick do. And so God made provision for the ailments of a world where he's not welcome. Still in his concern, he made it that there would be doctors and there would be medicines that could be found out there. Now, this time it's going to be very easy. God's going to have it so it's not found in a root and we don't have to go someplace and extract it. The leaf right there is going to have the medicine. You just go right to the river of God. Next to it, the tree of life. You grab the leaf. It'll take care of the sore. It'll take care of the bruise. Anything that may have happened to you. It is for the healing of all the people in the nations. And that's what we're seeing right here during the millennial reign. Back to where we go. Ezekiel 47, verse 13. And thus saith the Lord God, this shall be the border whereby ye shall inherit the land, and the inheritance will be according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Oh, and incidentally, Joseph shall have 2 portions. So again, this was a promise that was made way back when Jacob was on his deathbed, and What had happened was when Joseph went off into Egypt and he interpreted the dream for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh lifted him up. He got a wife, an Egyptian wife, and he had 2 children over there in Egypt who didn't know their grandfather Jacob till Jacob came later on. And when Jacob met the boys in Genesis chapter 48, great chapter, and Israel said to Joseph, God hath showed me thy seed, verse 11. And Joseph took both of the boys, Ephraim in his right hand, and was bringing them forward for the blessing toward Israel's left, and Manasseh in Joseph's left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them near. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head. And he kind of crossed his hands like this as he gave the blessing, as a picture of the cross of Jesus Christ. And that's how he gave the blessing. And verse 15, and he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, because the angel of the Lord appeared to him. Bless the lads, and let my name be on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the earth. And he brought them as his own child, is kind of what he did. As if they were born by him in this particular blessing, they were brought in to the 12 tribes of Israel. And that would be in, let's say, verse 3 and 4. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz, which means light, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me, and he said, behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee. I will make of thee a multitude of people. I will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, they're now mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they are mine. And so Joseph shall have 2 portions in the land, just as if those 2 boys were born unto to Jacob himself. And God's telling him in Ezekiel, this is how you're going to set the land up. Joseph, you have to go 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 1. First Chronicles chapter 5, and after chapters 2, 3, and 4, we've been talking about Judah, and now it's like, okay, let's get back to the firstborn, because he jumped ahead to Judah, and because Judah is preeminent, because that's the line of the throne of David through whom Jesus would come. But now we get back to the firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, and then it says in parentheses, long parentheses to the end of verse 2, now he was technically the firstborn, but for as much as he, Reuben, defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph. And the right of the firstborn was a double portion. And so now Joseph is given the double portion, and it's given to his 2 boys. And Joseph, so it was given to Joseph, the son of Israel. Oh, and then, by the way, he has to put a colon there and remind us. And the genealogy doesn't mean it has to be reckoned after the birthright, because you can say, well, if Joseph's got the double portion, he has the birthright blessing and he gets the genealogy and Jesus is going to come to him. Well, not really, for Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler. But the birthright is Joseph's, and so it continues in Ezekiel 47, and so Joseph gets 2 portions when you set the land up. Verse 14, and verse 13 is, thus saith the Lord God. And he says, and ye shall inherit it, the land, one as well as another. In other words, every single tribe gets an inheritance in the land. Reuben will have a portion in the land. Asher will have a portion in the land. Benjamin will have a portion in the land. Joseph's boys, Ephraim will have a portion. Manasseh will have a portion. That gives Joseph a double portion, if you will. Why is this? Well, verse 14, ye shall inherit it, one as well as another. Why? Concerning the which I lifted up my hand to give it unto your fathers. In other words, I took an oath, God says. God says, I raised my hand before all the universe with an oath. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? God says, I'm going to hold my hand up for the whole universe. I lifted up my hand, and I told everybody, I'm giving it to your fathers, and this land, therefore, is going to fall to you for an inheritance, because it was my oath. It's the promised land, and I gave it to Abraham by a promise. And because I could swear by none other, I swear by myself, as Paul told the Hebrews, and I raised my hand for this. That's my oath. I lifted up my hand that the land will fall unto you. Verse 15, and this will be the border of the land toward the north. From the great sea, the way of Hethlon, as men go to Zedad, Hamath. That's going to be the northernmost portion. Berothah, Sibraim, which is between the border of Damascus. That would be the others. Hamath is about 100 and something miles north of Damascus, which is about 150 miles north of Jerusalem. So the northern border is way up there, way up above Jerusalem, 300 plus miles. One of the best, if you want. Clarence Larkin's book on dispensational truth, on page 93, he has a drawing here of the millennial land from Hamath all the way here, where the first portion is Dan, and then Asher and Naphtali and Manasseh. They'll all be spelled out in the 48th chapter. And he has it drawn here with the holy city in the middle and the portion for the priests and where Jesus will live. And the whole thing is drawn out there very nicely. If you want, we can just wait and get a map when we're there. But he's laying it out here. I'd like a good map from, maybe they'll have AAA then. I don't know. Maybe it'll be triple C. I don't know. But anyway, and verse 17, the border from the sea, that would be the Mediterranean Sea, shall be Hazar Enan, the border of Damascus, going northward, the border of Hamath. This is the north side. The east side, you measure from Haran, from Damascus, and from Gilead. The land of Gilead was on the other side of Jordan. From the land of Israel by Jordan, from the border to the east sea. This is the east side. Again, I get confused by all these places. I just look at his map, and I'll wait for the real one when I'm there. And the south side, southward, from Tamar even to the waters of the strife in Kadesh, when they were coming south out of Egypt under the Sinai Peninsula, above the Gulf of Aqaba, is Kadesh there, way down south. And the west shall be the great side, the border, the Mediterranean Sea. A man comes over against Hamath. This is the west side. And so shall ye divide the land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. And in chapter 48, he's going to lay out the tribes from the north to the south. You see Dan, and then beneath Asher, just like it is on the drawing here. Now, verse 22, he goes on, and he lets us know, and it shall come to pass that as you divide it, that will be the land, by lot, for an inheritance unto you, you Jews, it's also to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you. So again, we've often talked about the millennium. The millennium is God's third and final try. The first one was to Adam, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The second time was Noah in the new world, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The third time is at the beginning of the millennial kingdom after the tribulation and all the billions that have died through the tribulation, through the 21 judgments of the seals and the trumpets and the vials and the battle of Armageddon. And now we're starting all over. Jesus, and he's got the Jews and he's got some Gentiles, and now we're dividing the land. There are going to be strangers sojourning among the 12 tribes, and they will beget children among you. Just as you Jews will beget children, we're going to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the millennial earth. And they shall be born unto you, has born in the country among the children of Israel. They'll be naturalized citizens. If they're serving you like Eliezer of Damascus was serving Abraham, and a faithful servant is living there with you and working your land and has children, then they're going to have an inheritance inside the Holy Land. And this is what God's setting up. And they'll have an inheritance with you among the tribes. It shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance, saith the Lord God. And again, he's showing Ezekiel, I'm the God of the whole earth. I mean, the Gentiles are going to be here. Now, I was thinking about it in verse 22. When you divide it by lot for an inheritance, and the strangers that sojourn among you, how's that going to be set up? And then I thought, well, it must be, go back to Matthew chapter 25. I think it will be determined by Jesus. Jesus will determine who goes where. He is the King of Kings sitting on the throne. 25. And in verse 31, Jesus says, when the Son of Man shall come, and he shall, in his glory, in a resurrected body, and all the holy angels come with him, because they're coming. I saw a white horse in heaven, and here all the Lord of hosts, and all his hosts are following him. Then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And there he is, as we saw. He's sitting on the throne there. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep, the one he's going to keep, from the goats that he's not going to keep. He'll set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. And then the king shall say to them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now the first thought is, well, those sheep are Jewish, but you're going to see they're not. For I was a hungered, and you gave me meat. I was a thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me. And then shall the righteous answer and saying, Lord, when saw we thee a hungered, or fed thee, or thirsty, or gave thee drink? When did we see thee a stranger, and take thee in, or naked, and clothe thee? When saw we thee sick, or in prison, and came to thee? And the king shall say unto them, I verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, my physical brethren, the sons of Abraham. You took care of that boy over there, Reuben, and you went to visit him in the hospital. And so now you're going to come in, and when Reuben has a portion in the land, you're going to be with that tribe. And you took care of that one over there when he was thirsty, and you gave him something to drink. And so now you're going to be over there with Asher, and you helped that Levite over there. You're going to be with him. And the Lord and the king will say, you know, you did it to one of my brethren. To the ones on the left, depart from me. But the other ones, like he told them earlier, he's going to tell them, let me find the verse again. I already lost it. Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. And the kingdom was prepared for the faithful. This is the kingdom of heaven on earth, people that listen to God's words, people that acted according to God's words. And again, he's just reminding Ezekiel, although he's not exactly using the word Gentiles, the strangers are Gentiles. They were the ones without the covenants of promise. This is promised all through there. I'm thinking of the great chapter in Isaiah 11, the millennial chapter. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and the branch shall grow out of his roots. And verse 10, in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. An ensign is like a banner. It's like a flag. It's a sign that they all come to. And so that maybe on the top of the temple, or maybe where he lives, there's a big banner that has the name Jesus or Emmanuel on it. And it'll be an ensign of the people. The people are the Jews. And also, to that ensign, shall the Gentiles seek. And you seek and ye shall find. And his rest, that would be the rest of the Messiah, shall be glorious, whether you're one of the people or you're one of the Gentiles. Later on, he would say, go to Isaiah 42. These are the promises in the Old Testament given to the Jews to remind them that God's the God of the whole earth. He's not just the God of the Jews. Isaiah 42, the Father tells Isaiah, behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, talking to the Jews, and he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles also. I mean, the Gentiles too. Verse 6, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness. I will hold thine hand. I will keep thee and give thee for a covenant of the people, that's the Jews, and for a light of the Gentiles. And so the promise is all through the scriptures. When Paul was writing to the Romans, and he was trying to explain to them Romans chapter 9, go to verse 23 and 24. Romans 9:23. The strangers that are among you, they're going to have children, and they'll have an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. No, the land is just ours. No, the land is God's, and God's land goes to those that hear his words faithfully and follow them. Romans 9:23, that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, the ones that open their hearts to his mercy and grace, which he had afore prepared unto glory. His desire was always to give them glory, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also the Gentiles. Has he said also in O.C., or Hosea, when he had to go out and marry Gomer, okay, a Gentile, who I will call them my people, which were not my people, and I'll call her beloved, which was not beloved. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, you're not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. He's the God of all the earth. And so we see, it shall come to pass when you divide it, the strangers that sojourn among you, which beget children, in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance. And he can go to the water of the river of life, and he can go to the tree of life, and he can have the healing, and he can be part of it. And the wall of partition is now broken down because the ensign is Jesus Christ. And so that's the last we have there today. Amen. That's it. It's so black and white. Is it me? I never see it. No.